ecosistema de innovación de FinTech. Agradecemos que tomen sus asientos de forma inmediata para poder continuar con el programa.
We're going to start right now. Yeah, we're going to start right now. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. I am Felice Gorordo, CEO of Emerge Americas, and I am honored to participate in this year's Foro Global. Before anything, I want to thank Presidente Leonel Fernández, la Fundación Global Democracia y Desarrollo for hosting us and convening such a distinguished group of leaders for such a timely discussion on el futuro del dinero. On a personal note, I also need to share my deep appreciation and admiration for President Fernández. Felt fortunate to have first met President more than 20 years ago, and feel truly privileged to have witnessed his steadfast leadership in action time and time again. I think we all agree that his leadership and his vision for the future remains badly needed on the global stage, and we thank him for continuing to promote the discussion and debate on ideas that will advance democracy and sustainable economic development here and around the world. For those unfamiliar with Emerge Americas, we are a platform focused on transforming Miami into becoming the tech hub of the Americas. And we do this by convening all the stakeholders that make up any thriving tech ecosystem, from government to higher ed, large corporate enterprises, early stage startups, incubators, and accelerators. We connect the dots between the entrepreneurs, the talent, and the capital. And we tell the story of how South Florida and the region as a whole is transforming. We organize startup pitch competitions, innovation challenges, investor summits, and executive roundtables as part of our roadshow throughout Latin America. And we're proud to say we're going to be hosting our next stop in the roadshow here in Santo Domingo later this fall. Every spring, we also host a global technology conference at the Miami Beach Convention Center, which draws more than 20,000 attendees from over 4,000 unique companies. At Emerge, we believe that the rise of Miami and the rise of tech across the Americas represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform our region for the better and create a new high-skilled and good-paying jobs for the knowledge economy. Our mission is to catalyze and capitalize on this very moment so it doesn't pass us by. Moreover, we believe we have a responsibility to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind. And thanks to a great extent because of the leadership of our next speaker, Miami has undergone a transformative and exponential growth, especially in tech and in venture. To help us unpack some of the lessons learned and how Miami can be a model for the cities and ecosystems aspiring to do the same, please join me in welcoming the City of Miami Mayor, President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and Emerge America's board member, and my good friend, Mayor Francis Suarez.
Liche, it's great to be with all of you, and thank you so much for this invitation. Thank you to the former president for this opportunity to share with you all the wonderful things that are happening in Miami and why we think it's transformative, not just of this country, of the United States of America, but of this hemisphere and potentially the world.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for joining us. I know we don't have a lot of time, so jumping right in. A lot has been written about Miami and the transformation it has undergone over the course of the last 2 years. But this didn't happen overnight, and you're quick to remind folks that this would not have been possible if it were not for the blood, sweat, and tears of leaders both in the public and private sector over the course of the last 20 years. But you've also said that this isn't a moment, it's a movement, and I couldn't agree more. But there's no question that there was a tipping point, and your leadership was pivotal in ensuring Miami could capitalize on the momentum and interest from so many who wanted to relocate during COVID. And in December 2020, you famously tweeted, "How can I help?" to an investor from a well-known venture capital fund when he posed the question, what if we move Silicon Valley to Miami? Mr. Mayor, walk us through that exchange and what steps you took and your administration to make sure you could realize that vision.
Well, Felice, as you mentioned, the "How can I help" tweet was a moment in time, but you have to sort of go back 10 to 15 years and realize that there were many leaders in our community, including the creator of Emerge Americas, Manny Medina, and his daughter, Melissa, that we both have an opportunity to work with, that saw the need for a mature ecosystem, technological ecosystem, as a means of creating prosperity for more and as a means of survival, really, of an existential survival for a city going forward. And so with their leadership and many others, we started creating this technology ecosystem. We did it by creating Emerge, which is a large tech conference. We did it by funding incubators and accelerators like Endeavor Miami and 500 Startups and Venture Hive, et cetera. And then, as this Web3 inflection was happening, this sort of transition from the industrial world to the digital world, that was sort of happening in a moment in time. All of the energy, all of the planting and seeding and watering that was done to create the foundations of an ecosystem got a tremendous shot in the arm. We call it a direct IPO, right? We were able to go from friends and family funding, seed funding, all the way to an IPO overnight, and that's the beauty of the disruptive world that we live in. That you can scale incredibly fast if you get ahead of these disruptive opportunities.
Amen, amen. And one of the things that I remember right after that tweet was you organized a Zoom because this was still during COVID, so we couldn't all come together, but you did it virtually, and you brought together all the Miami tech leaders, all the local investors, entrepreneurs, even the university presidents. And you asked them for advice, but you also asked them to lend in and help you realize that vision that we all wanted to make real. I honestly think that's probably one of the best Harvard Business School or Kennedy School case studies, if there isn't one already, on how to galvanize public and private sector support to realize a common project. And I know you've institutionalized a lot of these efforts and this work in Venture Miami. Can you talk to us a little bit about what is Venture Miami, how does it work, and how can public policy leaders and other ecosystem leaders learn from that to help do the same in their cities?
Well, as you said, after the How Can I Help tweet, which sort of went viral, it got 3 million impressions, I decided that there was something here, right? That this was this sort of moment that we wanted to sort of take advantage of. And I tweeted myself 800 more times in the month of December. But I very quickly realized that one person alone cannot sustain the level of energy, the sort of back end, I call it, to sustain this movement and to really allow it to grow to its potential. So I realized quickly that I had to turn and ask the rest of the ecosystem of Miami to help me to make this possible, to make the ability to cultivate this ecosystem real. And I can tell you that of the 12 years I've been in public service, I have never in my 12 years felt more supported by all of the NGOs, all of the organizations in Miami than I felt in that moment. And as you said, Venture Miami, which we created as a result of those discussions, Knight Foundation, it was populated by FIU, it was populated by the University of Miami. So, all of these organizations said, hey, we're going to give you resources, Miami-Dade College, we're going to give you resources to build this out. And once we were able to do that, and we had a phenomenal leader in Saifi Shuf, who's now working with us in eMERGE, once we were able to build that out, we were able to show that the gains, right? And we showed it in terms of the high-paying jobs that we created. We showed it in the assets under managed companies that moved to Miami. We showed it in the increase in our venture capital pipeline. All of the metrics that we talked about 10, 15 years ago, when Manny was creating eMERGE, and we were helping to fund it at a very small level. So these were the things that we wanted to see move in a macroscopic way, and we were finally starting to see that because we were cultivating it at a more macroscopic level.
Absolutely, and cultivated you have. You've also famously coined the phrase that Miami is a capital of capital, or I believe you say the capital of capital. Can you explain to us what you mean by that, and how do you actually realize that vision?
Well, what I mean is a few things. One is the world is becoming more decentralized. So these sort of, master hubs, if you will, like New York for finance and Silicon Valley for tech, were somewhat disintegrating. You couple that with a variety of other macro factors. And what we're seeing was a shift in what I call the center of gravity of the United States from New York in finance and from Silicon Valley in tech, both to Miami. And that confluence of capital that we were seeing migrate from New York and California was creating something new. It was creating a new hub where to the extent that centralized decisions are made, it's going to be made in a place where capital is aggregated. And we think Miami will be the largest aggregator of capital and the largest deployer of capital, potentially in the world. That's my vision. That's what I see happening. And that's what we're working towards. And there are, like I said, a lot of macro forces that are sort of wind at our back that are helping us accomplish that. But we have to do what we have to do to make sure that becomes a reality.
Absolutely, and I think another point in that is that in this transformation that's occurred over the course of the last 18 to 24 months, there's no doubt that blockchain technology, digital asset ecosystems, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and of course cryptocurrencies have played a big role in that. But you have also been quick to respond to those who are bearish on crypto, that even though there are going to be highs and lows, gains and losses in the short term, we need to stay focused on the long-term applicability of these technologies. For folks who are new to this space and looking to get involved, and for those who are decision makers, especially other elected officials, how would you recommend that they get started in this space if this is something new? And how particularly have you gone about educating yourself and becoming, I think at this point, pretty much an expert in all things blockchain and crypto?
Yeah, I feel like in the last couple of years, I've gotten a PhD in a lot of these technologies. Certainly, connecting in the right circles with people who are experts, listening. Obviously, I've read a tremendous amount in the space. I was part of the Florida Blockchain Foundation. When the CFO named me on behalf of the state of Florida, the Florida Blockchain Task Force as well. So, I've gotten involved in things that are going to increase my knowledge sphere. So I would recommend that people, obviously not only just Google things, but read books on the things that they, that they are passionate about. I think it's a lot more intuitive than what people think. It's really the digitization of our society. It's really taking all these analog assets and making them digital. So it's not as complex as people think. For some reason, when you transition from something you can touch to something that only you can see, it creates a lot of confusion for people who are used to that legacy system. But the truth of the matter is money is still money, or stores of values are still stores of value, things that you exchange. Art is still art. It's just in a different form. Contract, there are things that are evolutions, right? Like the smart contracting concept, where contracts will do if-then functions, right? As opposed to a static contract that you just look at the words on the paper and you interpret them, and a judge will have to decide who's right and who's wrong. You can build functionality into contracts now where if something happens, then something else happens. And so that is a part of the evolution of computers thinking more, being taught to learn, being taught to think, quantum computing. Then of course, cybersecurity becomes a big issue, because you have to make sure that the data that you're aggregating is protected, because data is going to become, one of the most sought after and valuable pieces of information.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, another thing I know that you're very passionate about is talent development and learning from the best of the best. And all the major technology hubs at a global scale do a great job of not just attracting great talent, but cultivating their own homegrown talent pipelines. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in Miami with Miami's universities and colleges to help build out our own homegrown talent pipelines?
Yeah, look, I think first you have to recognize that talent will go where there's opportunity, right? 95% of the people that live in Silicon Valley were not born in Silicon Valley. So, talent migration is something that happens based on capital migration, right? And so I think the fact that capital is migrating to Miami, we're seeing that we're #1 in the nation in tech job migration, right? In addition to tech job growth. But I think it's important that we cultivate our own talent, right? I mean, when I was young, I had friends that went to a lot of the same schools that I did that ended up going to college, outside of Miami. A lot of good friends that did that. And some of them didn't come back because some of the jobs that they were seeking were not available. And the jobs that sort of change the world and that are scalable, like technology, were just not available in Miami. And so that always bothered me. And it always sort of left me feeling like, people are being separated from their families and they're not getting an opportunity to be reunited. So that's something I focused on with the university system, the current university system, to try to reinforce it. The Knight Foundation has been a huge participant in that. And now we're also looking at other educational partnerships that could give us sort of that premium status that, as you mentioned, some of these other tech ecosystems have by virtue of the educational institutions that are in the surrounding areas. I think every major tech city should have high-level tech education. And then I'd say the last piece is, we have a brand in Miami called Miami for Everyone. We want to make sure that everyone in our city has an opportunity to be successful. I don't think I'd be doing my job as mayor if I couldn't wake up in the morning knowing that I was working as hard as I could to try to make that a reality. So we're focusing on tech charter schools. We're focusing on reinforcing our educational ecosystem so that every child has an opportunity to be successful.
Amen. No, and I think, another, if we're unpacking the secret sauce and the recipe that goes into the Miami success story, I think another really important element of this has been your overall communication strategy. You're undoubtedly the best ambassador and evangelist that we have for this vision that we all are striving to try and realize. Talk to us a little bit about how you've gone getting the message out, changing the narrative also about Miami, and being able to also bring folks into the conversation that typically have not been part of it.
Yeah. I kind of backed into that strategy. I think, I was the first person to get COVID, ironically, on March 12th, 2020. And a good friend, who's someone I really listened to, gave me an idea to do a diary, right? For every day that I had COVID. And my social media just exploded. And the transparency and the connectivity and understanding what the portal of social media could be used for, was very powerful. It sort of resonated with me. And then I think the second part was, to change a reputation, it takes time and it takes repetition. If you want to change your reputation from being someone, who was young and sort of daring to someone who is a little more serious and studious, it takes time. You gotta be serious and studious for a long period of time before people start to say, I wonder if that person has changed. So I think part of the whole Cafecito Tech Talks, which were, having this podcast that was free and that told the Miami story, because people come see me constantly. And I wanted to open that up. I wanted that level of transparency to open that up to my viewers, to those who don't have an opportunity to be in the room when I'm meeting these incredible people and share their stories, the Miami stories, with the general public. That's given me an opportunity to really communicate this at scale and help change the reputation of Miami.
Amen. Absolutely. Last but not least, because I know we're limited on time, today's forum is titled "The Future of Money," and FitTech is definitely the leading vertical for venture capital dollars invested in South Florida as well as across the Americas. Can you share us with what you think is the future of money and how the region as a whole should position itself to capitalize on what that future entails?
Yeah. So first of all, we've seen a 2,000% increase in investments in blockchain companies in Miami in the last couple of years. So that's unbelievable, which also shows the appetite for investments in that ecosystem. So that's part of it. I think the other part is, look, we're seeing rampant inflation. When we're seeing a Fed has to combat that with increasing interest rates. It makes you wonder what is the best system, right? And I think, we can debate whether, Bitcoin should be at 20,000 or 30,000 or 50 or 60,000. I think the fact that it's at 20,000 times more valuable right now than the base currency of the world gives you an indication of how the market prices one system versus another. That's the way I look at it. And I think it's interesting that one system is open source, it's transparent, but it is, and was created by human beings, but it's not human manipulated, versus another system where, the biases of people, their desires to want to affect a certain outcome that may be beyond the monetary system influences their decisions. And so I think that's what we're going to see play out over the next few years. And we'll see the sort of the benefits and the detriments of both systems. And who knows what will happen? Will they merge? Will we have both systems running in parallel? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I know we had you waiting for a little bit, so we want to thank you for your patience, for being so gracious with your time and your insights. I mean, I think in summation and in summary, a couple things that I heard that's part of the secret sauce of Miami is definitely bringing everyone to the table, all stakeholders, being intentional about connecting those dots, and being also purposeful with the story you're trying to tell and evangelize. Absolutely. But none of this would be possible without great leadership. And so we thank you for your leadership. And we thank also President Fernández for his leadership and La Fundación. Yes. And we look forward to continuing the conversation both here and in Miami at Emerge Americas. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You got it. All right.
Thank you very much, Felice. And thank you to the Mayor of Miami. We're definitely enjoying his sharing of his best practices and his experiences in his city. It's definitely going to be one example to follow. Next up in our program, lo siguiente en nuestro programa es la participación, las palabras del señor Brooke Pierce, quien es el chairman de la Fundación Bitcoin y también es un gran pionero de blockchain, inversionista de impacto y filántropo con un amplio historial de fundación, asesoramiento e inversión en empresas disruptivas. Le damos la bienvenida al señor Pierce. Mr. Pierce, the floor is yours. Señores, el señor Brock Pierce.
All right. Do we have a clicker and the presentation or no? Here we are. Is there a clicker? Well, good afternoon, Casa de Campo, Dominican Republic. I'm Brock Pierce. And I'm grateful to be here with you today and to present for the first time an organization that was birthed organically through an activity that started just over a year ago, starting with El Salvador and their legislation to create the Bitcoin law, and that is unicorn.org, or the United Council of Rising Nations. So what is a unicorn? Aside from being a mythical animal that I think any of you with kids may know well, and your kids may love and be on t-shirts and otherwise, but a unicorn in the context of technology, which is where most of my life and career has taken place, is what we call a startup that has achieved a $1 billion valuation. And there's been over 1,000 companies in the technology sector that have achieved this mythical status, some of which, 50 of whom, have gotten to a $10 billion or greater valuation. More than 50 countries in the world have a GDP below these organizations. Startups, innovative technologies are creating companies and organizations with values greater than 25% of the world's nations. This is a very interesting time in civilization or human history, where private or public companies have influence on par with that of nation states. We don't think there's any reason why governments are not, governments can't be in a position, to have this sort of impact. These being just a few of these companies: Spain, Mexico, Australia, South Korea, and their market caps being on par with Amazon at over 1 trillion. The Facebooks or the Metas, the Apples of the world, and the impact they have on economies around the world. Microsoft, Apple. So the idea is that countries, if they become entrepreneurial, if they become startup nations, if they try to bring in entrepreneurial DNA into the governments and work with the private sector correctly, to use innovation as a tool for rapid and positive transformation can't become unicorn nations or unicorns too. And so, me and a number of my friends on the forefront of innovation are looking for countries that want to embrace this type of change. And so I'm glad to be here to engage with the private sector, the public sector, the nonprofits, the creative culture, and the government to see how those of us on the forefront of change can understand the issues here and provide creative solutions to the challenges at hand to enable this country and others to become unicorn nations. And so the United Council of Rising Nations is a member association. This is the first time it's been presented publicly, promoting technology, financial inclusion, and equality across all countries, representing nations of all sizes and every sector. We deploy leaders with these solutions because there's a new generation. Historically, if you were on the forefront of change, if you had the latest and greatest in intellectual property or a product, you would typically go to the largest nations in the world with the biggest populations or the potential for customers and the highest GDP, because that's where the biggest economic opportunity would lie for you. There's a new generation of entrepreneurs and leaders that are not focused on the markets where they can make the most money, but are interested in the places where they can create the most positive change. I don't measure my success in life by what I have. I measure my success by the impact I'm having in the world. It's why I say that a billionaire to me isn't someone with $1 billion, but someone who's positively impacting the lives of 1 billion people or more. If life were a video game, and I come from the gaming business, I don't measure my score by what I've personally accumulated. I went into the options menu of life and I play a different game. I play a game of impact. I think that's what the world needs right now, and there's not just me, there's a lot of us that are focused on how do we build a better world, and a world that can work for everyone. And we have new tools that can help facilitate that change here and now. That's our mission. We're very interested in the Sustainable Development Goals. You know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. These things have already been mapped out. You know, for example, I was a part of, I'm the only public person that's visibly involved with a project called Diatom. How many of you know what a diatom is or what diatoms are? D-I-A-T-O-M. Diatom is a single-celled organism or a phytoplankton that is responsible for sequestering 50% of the world's carbon and creating half of the oxygen on Earth that we need to breathe. Star Trek did an episode of a planet where whales were necessary for the survival of that planet. It turns out that's planet Earth, because there's a symbiotic relationship between the whales and the diatom. The diatom can't live without the whales and vice versa. And so we, trying to solve the Sustainable Development Goal number 14, you know, the oceans, created a project called the Diatom DAO, where using NFTs, or non-fungible tokens as art, we sold 50 whales in a whale sale, where the proceeds of that sale went into the Diatom DAO, or the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, or the endowment. Then through the beginning of a token sale, adding more resources to it, utilizing this thing called DeFi, or decentralized finance, to generate yield from the market for the purposes of refi or regenerative finance, to create a flywheel, something that can create perpetual resources to solve one of the world's greatest problems. We then created a new credit market called PRC, or plastic removal credits, that were pegged to the underlying currency called DIOT, where 1 kilogram of plastic in the world's ocean was the underlying currency. And in the same way that we use carbon credits as a way where those that are emitting can take responsibility for their actions, it creates the demand side of the market. So using NFTs, DAOs, DeFi, and a new credit market to create demand, we took a first attempt at weaving all these technologies together to solve one of the world's greatest problems. You know, that first experiment brought in its tens of millions. We hit the restart or reset button. These ideas will keep emerging. But there's a group of us that are trying to solve the world's biggest problems using innovative new ideas. And a lot of these things could take place here. We had also created a game where if you identified large amounts of plastic in the ocean, you tag it or you grab it and you bring it back to a port and receive that digital currency for it. This is just the forefront of change, and we're going to continue to work our way through all of these issues. So this is the concept of thinking outside the blocks. You know, and this isn't just about cryptocurrency. It's about how do we upgrade our energy infrastructure in a way that can create a world that persists for the generations that follow. New forms of telecom infrastructure. I'm part of a project called Skydweller. We have the world's largest drone in the world. It's got the wingspan of a 747. It won the world record using solar power to traverse the entire planet. It holds about an 800-pound payload of telecom equipment. It's basically a flying cell phone tower, and that's coming to the Caribbean to be able to provide ubiquitous access to telecom, even in rural areas, at low cost. You know, this is a technology that can be brought here, for example. How do we upgrade supply chains? Hunter, who's here in the audience, built the free trade economic zone for the government of Dubai, I think increasing their GDP by 6%. And there's all sorts of stuff in terms of how technology can create efficiency in our supply chains. Certainly in the context of food, there's a famine coming because of the disruption of what's happened between Russia and the Ukraine. Fortunately, the grain is going to flow, but the accelerant or the fertilizer that was needed from Russia, the Belarus, and the Ukraine didn't get to where it was needed. Winter is coming, and there's a lot that can be done to create efficiency in supply chain to make sure that food gets to the places that are needed. Certainly, island nations where food security should be at the top of your list. The DR, I'm not concerned about as much as I am other places in the region. Obviously, healthcare. Real wealth is health at the end of the day. Our systems of education, finance, trade, taxes. These technologies are not just about the future of money. Technology, in the same way that the internet has impacted every industry, all of our lives, and now all of our institutions, are going to continue to create change, right? Change is a constant. It's not if it's going to happen, it's how we react to it, right? That is our responsibility, our response to it. And so I'm glad on behalf of our organization to be able to come here and to begin a sort of reconnaissance mission to better understand the issues in the DR and how we might be able to provide innovative solutions to work with you and the future of your country. I like to say that technology by itself is amoral. It's a tool. It's neither good or bad. How we use it and our intentions determines the impact it has. Since today is about the future of money, I should at least take a moment to talk about what's happening there. I was the chairman of Mastercoin. We were the first to ICO, changing capital formation, where in the past you needed to be in the Silicon Valley to have access to resources. Capital formation is changing, where if you have a great idea, you can access resources from anywhere. COVID has also accelerated this idea that we can work from anywhere. And a place with beautiful weather and beaches like right here looks like a pretty appealing place to work, meaning there's an ability to attract the best and the brightest because they can work from anywhere now. And this is a pretty good place. And capital formation is allowing that to occur. That's one thing. I was also one of the founders of Tether. We invented the stable coin. It's doing over $50 trillion a year in transactional volume. We invented the idea of CBDCs and how governments and monetary systems and policies can be used in terms of technology to upgrade those systems. And happy to continue to engage here, with this government and the banking sector. I've started a couple of banks, so I know a little bit about that as well. I've done a little bit of everything, and ever a student and curious to learn and to work with. I live in Puerto Rico, and so coming here is incredibly convenient. I can take a boat, so always happy to find a good excuse to visit. Another issue that is prevalent in the world is this concept of banking, the on and underbanked. A majority of the population of the world doesn't have access to financial services. These technologies are really making an impact in creating financial inclusion. One example, I think President Bukele may have given a virtual speech here today. If not, I'll highlight some of the impact that he's had. 70% of the population of El Salvador was unbanked, even though we've known about this issue for decades. No one had been able to put a meaningful dent into those numbers. This Bitcoin law flipped the script. It went from 70% not having access to 70% having access. Clearly, there's still some growing pains. There's still some issues and kinks that need to be worked out. But these numbers don't lie. It's had an immediate impact that will take still a little bit of time and education to become smooth. But this is the only example of that I've seen with an outside technology. Panama during COVID implemented their driver's license or their system of ID to be able to get resources into the hands of the people during lockdowns. Another interesting example. In Africa, Kenya was the leading market in the world in terms of payments infrastructure. They used prepaid minutes as a form of currency to create financial inclusion. It was cell phone minutes or the telco standard. Obviously, places like China have become very advanced by using their messaging systems, as well as South Korea. So there are multiple solutions, and they exist, and every single one of them involve technology, and happy to continue to be a resource of knowledge for it. Right now, this is a hot topic, legislation and regulation around the world. And from my vantage point, I just see governments competing right now to implement innovative legislation to attract the agents of change. I've got over 40 governments trying to get me there to advocate and understand. I can't move around fast enough. This is easy, it's convenient. I'm sorry to everybody in Africa. It's a little easier to get to Central America and the Caribbean. And so I've prioritized you out of convenience. But there's incredible demand because the early impact of passing innovative legislation, even if it's meaningless, right, in the beginning, it's not about landmark legislation. You don't have to do anything at this point. In the future, you will. Anything big or bold. Right now, just something small sends a signal to the world's, the builders of the future. It sends a signal that you have a government that is interested in innovation, that is interested in engaging in conversation and wants to learn. The bar is incredibly low right now to attract agents of change. The bar will continually get higher because there's not that many of us. We can't be everywhere. And Puerto Rico, from my vantage point, is the center of the world. It's the capital of intellectual sort of innovation in this area. So very easy to attract those people, at least for day trips, to come over. And so, I won't go through all of this, but these are just some of the areas where we've been active. This is CZ, the founder of Binance, one of the wealthiest people in the world in a very short period of time, with the ambassador of El Salvador to the United States. We've led multiple missions there. Our first formal delegation, we were the first delegation to enter El Salvador when COVID hit. We brought 34 of us in, and that team implemented most everything that happened in El Salvador. And we were happy to be in service to their legislation to get that done. We've been throughout the Caribbean talking to countries. We've been spending time in Morocco and working with their government recently. Romania, I think we were in the Prime Minister's office when the war broke out. Obviously very sad, everything happening in Eastern Europe right now. Ecuador. And so grateful to be here. There's a long list of countries, and I live my life in service. You're my neighbors. From books I used to read, it said, love thy neighbor, so let me know how I can help. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. If you can remain in the stage for a little longer, we are about to open the floor for a couple of questions. Vamos a abrir los micrófonos al público para cualquier pregunta que tengan para el señor Pierce.
Yeah, I think we've got, we're going to go through a few questions. So if you have a question for me, please raise your hand. Someone is running a microphone around now.
Hi, my name's Alexandre Rigaud. I like to describe what I do as gamifying life for positively engaging humanity.
I love it.
Thanks. Love what you do. Very interesting. My question to you is, fully understand your approach towards the region, and what is your take on tackling such a nation, not a nation, but a region such as Africa with such solutions?
Well, as a region, the Caribbean is an area that I'm very interested in as a sandbox, right? These are, in some instances, very small countries that can implement innovative ideas very quickly because of the size. and an opportunity to create roadmaps that others can utilize at a larger scale. And so I'm very interested in the energy infrastructure in the region. You know, importing fossil fuels to create energy is fairly expensive. We have abundant sunlight. Again, the ability to implement financial tools, to access credit. There's a lot of stuff that can be done here, and it's just very easy for me to move around. I'm also very interested in Central America, but Africa, as you raised, is, I've always been saying in most of my talks for nearly a decade that it's Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia that stands to benefit the most, right? It's this concept of leapfrogging, right? You don't have the same level of incumbency of infrastructure where there's groups trying to protect what's there to the same degree. And so there's an opportunity to jump ahead of the developed world, right? To have the latest and greatest. And so I see Africa as the biggest region in the world that stands to benefit at scale the most in terms of lack of credit, you know, old or non-existent infrastructure. It's where the opportunity is greatest, but that's not to say it doesn't exist in a lot of places. You know, my interest is really in the nations that could use the upgrade most. And, you know, fortunately, you know, we are living in an unprecedented time where we've got incredible tools, you know, stuff that looks almost like it comes from a science fiction novel, you know, indistinguishable from magic because it's so advanced in terms of technology, and it's real, provably so. And it's here, available to those that are welcoming to it. I hope that answers your question. We've got a couple of hands in the back.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pierce. I have a question. Well, I have a team, and we are educated. As you know, when you go to different countries, education is important, right? And even people that you actually talk about the solutions, they don't understand that. We have a project locally here that calls the DIP. Yeah, the DIP. And we actually share or teach people what actually blockchain technology is, because people understand more about cryptocurrencies, but without blockchain, people don't understand that. How can you engage those people that don't understand, the people that are the leadership of those countries? How can you engage them to understand that blockchain is for everyone? Because they don't understand actually. When you go there, I'm sure that you know that that's the limitation that you have. Most of them doesn't have the knowledge of what the technology can do with us. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, change is hard, right? We all deal with it, even at an individual level, right? Change is challenging. The status quo is generally easiest because fortunately for most of us, I assume all of us in the room, it's quite comfortable. Change is often a little bit painful and it requires a great deal of effort, but we're living during a period of change, and there will be winners and there will be losers, right? I think that, as a government, it's easy to fear that which we don't understand, and we conquer fear with knowledge. It's our responsibility to take the time to be informed so that we can represent our people and our nations as best we can. It isn't that hard. It does require some effort to learn. As far as the cryptocurrency is concerned, it's easier to comprehend applications of technology than to understand the technology that underpins it, right? The blockchain is the underlying technology. Think of it as the operating system, like on your phone. And cryptocurrency was just the first application. It's just a new type of database, a database that brings security. It's the most secure system the world has ever seen. It brings transparency when desired to markets that could often use it, because that brings greater accountability, right? It brings speed and efficiency, all really good things that ultimately are unstoppable, right? When something comes along that is so much better than what's currently there, it is inevitable. When something is so much better than what currently exists, it eventually will render the old obsolete, right? These things are inevitable, and I think it's important to take the time to be informed. It's not a race. You don't have to go too fast. You don't have to take risk, as I said, baby steps. And you often don't want to be first. You don't want to be in El Salvador's position. But what you do want to be is a fast follower. You want to be watching the actions of others, studying the impact, make sure you know it, and know it in a timely manner so that you can be a fast follower. That's generally where the opportunity lies. You don't want to be last. And so, that's my view of knowledge, and obviously, it's an age thing and the importance of education, right? The young people just know it inherently, because digital is practically in their DNA. It's a little harder for those of us as we get older to change with the times, but it's still very possible. It just requires a little bit more effort. It's not inherent. It doesn't come automatically, but there is nothing happening right now that is so complex or difficult that you won't figure it out. It's just requires a little bit of effort. And generally, the best advice I give people is, if you haven't done it, how many of you own any cryptocurrency? Okay, looks like about a third of the room put their hand up. The easiest thing to do is just go buy $20 worth of Bitcoin, or 10 if that's too much, or 5 if that's too much. That's step one. It's not a financial investment. I've never encouraged people to invest in anything other than yourselves, to invest in your own knowing. That's step one. You'll learn, the lesson you'll learn is perhaps priceless, and it's $5, $10, $20, the price of a drink, or a bottle of wine, or a glass, depending upon where you are. And it'll equip you for the future and begin your journey of knowing. Hopefully that answered your question thoroughly.
Hi. You kind of answered my question in your last answer, but basically my point was that the thing I wanted to address or ask is, when we propose innovation, embracing those who are in a vulnerable position, those who are already at extreme risk, and innovation is inherently risky, how can we mitigate the negative impact of when innovation fails? Especially when this population doesn't have a safety net, when there's nothing to recover if they lose the little bit they have or that they don't have.
Yeah, it's worth talking a moment about the negative, right? Everything is, there's two sides to the coin, or of the coin, right? And as I said in a few minutes ago, that technology is amoral. It's a tool. How we use it determines the impact it has. And when new technologies emerge, like the internet and all of those things that have come before it, that technology is going to have good applications and negative applications. It's not going to be all good, right? You can't just look at things based upon where it is today. You have to also look at the future and what it will be like in the tomorrow. And so we're learning some of the hard lessons, right? When you have an asymmetry of information, when there's the have-nots and the haves in terms of knowledge, there will be bad actors that show up to try and take advantage of those that don't know any better, you know, and anyone that says, oh, invest in this or buy that, generally don't listen to them. You know, it's hard to be taken advantage of when you're thinking for yourself. When someone is just providing you with the wisdom or the knowledge to be informed so you can make informed decisions for yourself, you know, don't blindly trust, right? Trust your gut, your own intuition. And so what do you do? And these are, you know, the conversations that are happening at a regulatory level, right? Regulation itself isn't bad. It's there to hopefully stop bad actors, make examples of crooks, you know, so that they don't defraud or take advantage of people. But we don't want regulation also to stifle innovation, right? And it's a delicate balance of how do we protect the people, but also make sure that we're participants in the future, you know, and that we have a seat at the table. And so there's not a simple, clear answer to that. You know, it's, you know, we're learning. We're learning as we go. And there's still lessons to be learned and experiments to occur and finding that delicate balance of inviting innovation while at the same time, you know, making sure that people don't get hurt, of which they will. And it will happen some more. And that's okay. It's part of the process of learning. Part of why I told you $5, $10, $20. If that's how you start, that's the total exposure. That's as bad as you're likely going to get hurt. And I think that's a good place to start. Small, very small, until you're prepared, because you're going to need some learning. You know, when you bought your first computer or got your first smartphone, you know, your first credit card, you needed to learn a little bit. Don't let everyone have access to your credit card information. You know, don't let everyone have access to your social security or, you know, core identification information. Protect the passwords to your email accounts, right? These are all things we've been learning. It's not beyond your ability, but, you know, this is that next sort of step, and it's going to require a little bit more learning. And so, take your time, learn slowly, and take small steps. You know, change is happening, and it's happening quickly, but not so quickly that you need to panic, you know, step by step, both individually, as your businesses, and as a government and its institutions. Hopefully that answered your question.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pierce, for your energy and definitely for your positive views, which are not blind positivism, but based on your real life experiences. Unfortunately, time is precious, so vamos a dar por terminado este panel. We're going to end it here con un gran aplauso para el señor Pierce. Thank you very much. Y con esto damos paso a nuestro panel final de conclusiones y para ello vamos a invitar al escenario al señor José Frank Almeida y a María Gualesca Álvarez.
Bueno.
Probando. Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Llegando ya al final de la jornada, nos han puesto a José Frank y a mí una realmente difícil tarea, porque como compilamos un resumen de cerca de 10 minutos de todo lo que han sido los temas que hemos abordado en la jornada de hoy. Pero afortunadamente vamos a hacer esto como una conversación entre amigos, aprovechando que José Frank y yo somos amigos de muchas batallas, precisamente promoviendo el tema de la transformación digital en la República Dominicana y en América. Así que, José Frank, ¿qué hemos aprendido en el día de hoy?
Así es, María. Bueno, lo que a mí más me ha llamado la atención definitivamente es el interés. el interés en este tema, el interés en aprender, el hecho de que haya habido un público definitivamente tan concurrido, digamos, llama la atención. Y como tú bien dices, es muy difícil en un solo día poder abordar todos los temas que tienen que ver con esta transformación y con esta disrupción que se está dando, de nuevo, no solamente en el mercado financiero, sino lo que hace blockchain como tecnología en sentido general. Entonces, definitivamente, ojalá hayan otros espacios de discusión de este tipo, seguro que lo va a haber, y que obviamente podamos nosotros también pues tener la oportunidad de compartir con gente que ya tiene la experiencia en otras latitudes, en otros países, y que, bueno, nos ayuden en la República Dominicana a la implementación de esta tecnología.
Yo quisiera, como parte de estas conclusiones, referirme a una palabra que de alguna manera hemos escuchado a lo largo de muchas conversaciones, y es liderazgo. Y en esa línea, felicitar y agradecer el espacio que ha creado precisamente Funglode, la visión del presidente Fernández, Marco y todo su equipo, por permitir este tipo de conversaciones. Y es que el presidente Fernández siempre ha sido un disruptor en los temas tecnológicos y siempre ha visto un poquito más allá de la curva. Y en esa línea, yo tomando algunas anotaciones de palabras que fueron como constantes a lo largo de varias conversaciones, y a mí me gusta ser optimista, y yo creo que República Dominicana, la región, tiene hoy en día una gran oportunidad cuando miramos lo que está pasando en el mundo. Vemos que son crisis que como región y como país, pues nosotros pudiéramos ciertamente apalancarnos en todas esas cosas que ya tenemos y en aquellos conceptos que han sido bastante constantes en el día de hoy, y conceptos como la necesidad de políticas, regulaciones, pero que sean neutrales, objetivas, que no detengan el desarrollo, que si bien promuevan el ecosistema que se necesitan, no detengan la innovación y la creatividad, reglas claras en todos los sentidos. Y me queda clarísimo que todavía tenemos muchísimos retos, muchísimas interrogantes. Eso nos deja en que estamos ciertamente en un proceso de aprendizaje que creo que debemos abordar de diferentes maneras, sin perder todo lo que es la necesidad de atender el conocimiento, las competencias digitales con las que estamos preparando a nuestro talento, los niños y las niñas, pero también los no tan niños, los que nos vemos obligados a seguir aprendiendo, a seguir precisamente formándonos en todas estas disrupciones. Yo creo que es necesario abordar esta conversación desde lo que es el blockchain y de lo que son las criptomonedas. Yo creo que hay muchísimos matices que aclarar. Este tipo de espacios permiten una mayor profundidad sobre ello. Y yo creo que no hay duda de que hay muchísimas oportunidades, hay retos, definitivamente hay grandes desafíos, pero yo creo que son desafíos que podemos abordar si tenemos la voluntad para hacerlo, el liderazgo y definitivamente una conversación abierta, constante y clara como la que se ha tenido en el día de hoy.
Definitivamente, María. Otro aspecto importante que lo mencionó el señor Pierce hace unos minutos es que la tecnología es un habilitador, más que nada. Y eso es algo que nosotros siempre lo hemos hablado en diferentes foros en los que hemos estado, incluso María y yo juntos. La tecnología es un habilitador y lo que se haga con ella depende de las decisiones que nosotros tomemos. Entonces yo creo que también es importante ese foco, el foco de cómo, hacia dónde la dirigimos. Yo creo que el señor Pierce también dio algunos casos de uso interesantes. En los paneles se dieron algunos casos de uso interesantes. Aquí hay personas que son hacedores de leyes, por decirlo de alguna manera. Ahí está el empresariado, está la clase política. Yo creo que hay definitivamente un foro en el que se puede discutir este tipo de cosas y son los agentes de cambio que en definitiva necesitamos para que esto se dé. Otra de las cosas interesantes o una de las ponencias bastante interesantes y sobre todo balanceada, o para balancear, digamos, el escenario, fue la del señor Jim Reynolds, cuando explicaba precisamente lo que, en su opinión, era el Bitcoin. Y precisamente el hecho de que haya nacido como una herramienta de pagos persona a persona, no lo hace necesariamente un instrumento de inversión. Entonces yo creo que también son temas que fuera de lo que crea el entusiasmo por ver, como también alguien decía aquí, que alguien se puede hacer rico de la noche a la mañana, que no siempre eso pasa, no es así. Es también entender lo que hay de fondo con todo esto y las herramientas que se le da a la gente para que pueda pues utilizarlo.
La jornada de hoy ha transcurrido sobre el futuro del dinero, pero yo voy a repetir una pregunta. ¿Cuántos de aquí han de alguna manera jugado con criptomonedas o activos digitales? Sin vergüenza, recuerden que estamos en un foro abierto.
Sí, sí.
Entonces, viendo la cantidad de personas que han levantado la mano, yo creo que una conclusión y también fue una constante en varias de las intervenciones es que estamos en el presente y que ese futuro en el que nos han invitado a reflexionar pues obedece mucho más a cómo realmente empezamos a facilitar y a reorganizar este ecosistema para promover ese uso positivo y tomar como país las decisiones de cómo realmente hacer uso de esta herramienta que ya se encuentra entre nosotros, que cada día es mucho más creciente y que llegó para quedarse. Y yo creo que eso es una conclusión importante que sacamos de esta jornada. Aquellos que en algún momento han tenido la duda de si realmente esto es algo transitorio, de modo pasajero, yo creo que hay información profunda de la que hemos visto en el día de hoy que nos da una corriente importante de que somos irreversiblemente digitales, que los activos digitales llegaron para quedarse y que se trata un poco de cómo con ese liderazgo y este tipo de conversaciones realmente somos capaces de encauzar y de guiar ese proceso y definitivamente hacerlo de una manera más organizada y mucho más orgánica que lo que venimos haciéndolo hasta ahora.
Es así, definitivamente. Y cuando tú ves, por ejemplo, lo que pasó en la pandemia, muchas de las cosas de las que hicimos o cómo avanzamos desde el punto de vista digital en la pandemia fue prácticamente empujado por esa necesidad de que teníamos que seguir operando, teníamos que seguir construyendo como país y nos vimos en la necesidad entonces de pues digitalizar procesos que antes para nosotros no era posible o no se quería o no se podía adoptar o que se le tenía, para utilizar una palabra que se mencionó mucho aquí, no se le tenía la confianza suficiente. No había la confianza para digamos, utilizar todo el mecanismo, los procesos digitales. De nuevo, no solamente en el sistema financiero, sino en varias industrias que tuvieron que al final trabajar remotamente. Nosotros tuvimos varias experiencias en las que tuvimos que asistir clientes de manera remota completamente, cuando quizás el cliente o nosotros mismos no estuvimos preparados para ello. Entonces, sin duda, esto es un cambio y como bien dice María, llegó para quedarse. Ojalá que no sea definitivamente forzado, sino que tengamos el tiempo suficiente para aprender, para implementar y para adoptar.
Ya para concluir, yo quiero compartir con ustedes algunas notas que tomé de conclusiones que fueron, vamos a decir, repetitivas en varios de los oradores y de los panelistas que nos acompañaron, que de una forma u otra decían, yo creo que tenemos que tener un poco más de tolerancia al fracaso. O sea, la tecnología definitivamente es una herramienta, es algo muy volátil. Hoy estamos hablando de blockchain y criptomonedas, mañana seguro vamos a hablar de otra cosa. Así que yo creo que el tema de la tolerancia al fracaso es importante, aprender rápido. Alguien decía fast followers. Yo creo que estamos en tiempos donde hay que evitar parálisis por análisis, donde encontrar ese balance y ese equilibrio adecuado que es al que nos han invitado de alguna manera en muchas de las disertaciones para encontrar esas regulaciones, esas políticas, esas reglas claras que generen ese balance y ese equilibrio que yo creo que es parte de la fórmula secreta para tener una sociedad competitiva y exitosa. pero que todo esto depende de un factor muy importante. El liderazgo, como bien hemos mencionado, depende también de que seamos capaces como sociedad de tener la madurez, de tener a todos los actores sentados en la mesa, sociedad civil, academia, sector privado, sector público, todos los actores relevantes en un diálogo permanente, genuino, con una colaboración realmente abierta, porque al final eso es lo que la tecnología nos ha dejado, la posibilidad de disruptir la sociedad, pero si tenemos ese liderazgo, esa comunicación y a todos los sectores sentados en la misma mesa, como esa fórmula mágica de la que hablaba Felice y el alcalde, que es lo que está permitiendo que muchas de estas sociedades se revolucionen. ¿Y por qué no? República Dominicana tiene todas esas condiciones y un poco más.
Así es. Yo creo que lo cubrimos todo realmente. El último comentario que quisiera hacerles es que le tomemos la palabra a todos aquellos que nos han ofrecido su ayuda. Vamos a necesitarla definitivamente, vamos a necesitar gente con la experiencia de los panelistas que estuvieron aquí con nosotros hoy presentes. Hay que formar gente, con uno hablaba, por ejemplo, y me decía, mira, tenemos que formar auditores nuevos, tenemos que formar gente operativa nueva, tenemos que formar personal que pueda administrar todos estos procesos y que los conozca y que los entienda. Entonces, asimismo, como gente como el alcalde de Miami, por ejemplo, con lo que está haciendo, pues se han ofrecido a ayudarnos, tomémosle la palabra y definitivamente comencemos a trabajar juntos en este sentido.
Bueno, pues con esto creemos o esperamos haber logrado el cometido de en pocos minutos resumir un ejercicio de un día completo. Afortunadamente me tocó hacerlo con José Fran, como digo, alguien con quien hemos batallado en este mundo de la transformación digital, pero sobre todo nuevamente felicitar al Foro Global y a Funglode por permitir estos espacios, porque esto precisamente es una muestra de ese liderazgo y de eso que necesitamos, pedir ayuda, tener a los que nos ayuden y tener este diálogo con todos los que aquí estamos sentados. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, muchas gracias.
Podemos tener a los panelistas, por favor, en el escenario para la foto grupal. If we can have all the panelists, please, here on stage for the official photo, that would be great. Thank you so much.
I see many panelists and speakers. Can you come up to the stage for just